Welcome to Randomized Controlled Trials. Our second guest speaker is Dr. Sonia Cabell. She's the assistant professor in the College of Education. Dr. Cabell's research focuses on the prevention of reading difficulties among young children who are at risk, particularly those who are living in poverty. Dr. Cabell's work spanning pre-kindergarten through second grade consists of how to strengthen children's language and literacy skills that serve as precursors to both successful reading comprehension and word recognition. Sonia, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. I'm excited to be here. And I see some people in the room who are my esteemed colleagues from both the College of Education and from the Florida Center for Reading Research. And I also see wonderful doctoral students in both the College of Ed and College of Arts and Sciences. So I'm excited to have you all here and honored and privileged. Now, I took a slightly different route with my presentation. Instead of explaining some of the details of specific studies, I'm taking a more zoomed out lens. If in Q&A you want some more of the details of some of these studies, please feel free to ask. I'd be happy to share. And I kind of wanted to take a look at some of the challenges or barriers that I've encountered in doing randomized controlled trials, or considerations that I've had in doing randomized controlled trials. As was already said, my scholarly purpose is to really understand how to accelerate early reading and writing skills among young children living in poverty. And this includes how to help teachers and parents foster this learning with the goal of preventing later reading difficulties by laying a strong foundation for children early in their school careers. So my research looks at preschoolers and kindergartners, children in the early grades, in order to help children be on a more positive trajectory. And it really takes a what works lens, which RCTs are very good design for a what works kind of lens. Now, the funding sources that have funded my work are Institute of Education Sciences, which is the research arm of the US Department of Education. And I've had small pilot work funded by the FSU CRC and foundation grants. My key collaborators have been not only from Florida State University, but also from the University of Texas Houston Medical Center, Harvard University, and the University of Virginia. And I want to give a shout out to my collaborators because I feel like this work takes a team. And I'll talk about that later in the presentation too. So randomized control trials are based on a strong theory of change. This is just one example of a theory of change of mine that was in a grant application for an efficacy trial funded through the Institute of Education Sciences. And in this one, we were testing the curriculum core knowledge, language arts, and we wanted to test it in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade classrooms as children progressed in the years. Spoiler alert, we have kindergarten results, but first grade was disrupted by COVID and second grade was disrupted by textbook adoption in the districts. So that's going to be something I discuss in a few minutes. But you have to have a clear understanding of how what you are studying is actually going to move the needle on children's skills. So I'm going to talk about some examples where the unit of random assignment has differed from child level, classroom level, and school level random assignment. And I'll discuss a few reasons why we made the decisions that we did. So in this project, we examined the effects of a text messaging parent program on children's skills. And we worked with schools, and this was in preschool, so we worked with preschool classrooms, and we did a child level random assignment within the classroom to one of two conditions. So for example, of the children for whom we received consent, we randomly assigned half to participate in receiving the treatment, which was a particular set of literacy and language related text messages for parents, and the other half received a treated control, and that control was other sets of text messages not related to language and literacy, but more related to general health and well-being. In another experiment, we also used a within classroom lens. And in this case, this was an early writing study. And we separated the children for whom we had consent into two groups. Those who performed, who were not yet inventing spellings. And what that means is that they were lower performing in terms of their spelling knowledge. And those who were inventing spellings, and they were further along in their literacy knowledge. And what we wanted to do was randomly select children to receive the intervention, in this case, small group writing lessons that were delivered by researchers from each group. Okay. One of the reasons we chose within classroom random assignment in both of these studies was because we wanted to control for the classroom quality. The same teacher would be giving the instruction to the whole class, and then we would pull out certain children to receive additional instruction. In addition, these two projects had limited resources in terms of funding. So in order to have to maximize our power, we chose to randomly assign at the classroom, at the child level. In another study that has just been funded this year, actually, which we're going to embark on, called Teaching Together, we have classroom level random assignment, and there's a few pieces. I'm going to talk you through the random assignment here. Here, the random assignment of classroom into three conditions. We have a waitlist control, and by waitlist control, we just means that they will receive the treatment later on, but right now they're our control group. Then we have the classroom intervention only, and then a classroom plus the family intervention. Now, in this particular study, we have eligibility criteria where we're only going to look at certain students who are eligible for what is called Tier 2 services. So we screen all students to identify those who are eligible for the study because of their higher risk status. And then we randomly select among those students 10 per class. So you'll see that our design, again, we randomly assign to other conditions. So this is just to say that random assignment designs don't have to be straightforward into one of three conditions or one of two conditions. There could be further considerations that you are taking. And then finally, here's an example of a school level random assignment in which we randomly assigned in two separate studies or cohorts, we randomly assigned schools to be in the treatment group or in the control group in terms of a reading program that they were teaching. And this was kindergarten. And this took a lot of schools. So we had two large school districts who participated with us. And overall, there ended up being 47 schools across these two studies. Now, this is going to be too small for you to look at probably on your screen, but Brad gave some really good examples of consort charts from his studies. And this is exactly what that is. This is a consort chart to keep things organized. And I have my resources, I'll tell you where to find help to do these consort charts. But basically, you want to know who's in your study, who dropped, why, who was randomly assigned, what happened. You want to understand all of those pieces and organize all of those pieces from the beginning, and then report those pieces. Now, in thinking about considerations for conducting RCTs in school-based settings, I thought these are the things that bubbled up to the surface for me, but I'm sure that for some of you, especially those of you in the audience who conduct RCTs, probably different things bubble up to the surface. But I want to give you some thoughts about recruitment. So something I learned about recruitment in districts and in schools and centers and with teachers is that my priorities are different than a district's priority. And so when I approach districts to participate in a study, I have to understand their context. And it really helps if you really have a true partnership that was already existing with them. I haven't always had that, but it really helps if you do, because then you can build on that true partnership that you have. The risk of that is the true part, the real close partnership, they'll never want to study the thing you want to study. And so I kind of live in that space of, okay, I want to study a certain thing, but sometimes partners that I'm developing don't want to study that thing. They want to study something different. And so I think setting a randomized control trial in a district is very difficult, and in my experience, especially when you want to take over kind of the reading block time or a certain block of the day, which was what my study was looking to do, to take over a large chunk, half or more of the reading time. So one strategy that I used was I wanted to find districts that were already starting to implement the curriculum that I was wanting to test in some of their schools, but not all of their schools. And so in that way, I wanted to create a win-win situation between me, the research project, and the district in giving them training and materials for their classrooms. In addition, incentives are very important. And I think making sure, and more, I feel like over the past 15 years of my doing this work, I feel like incentives have become even more and more important in terms of what are teachers going to get for doing X, Y, or Z? What are districts going to get? What are schools going to get? And part of the promise is that you will likely train more than just the treatment group. You'll also train the control group later on in the treatment and give them the materials. In terms of consent procedures, some of the things that we've had to keep in mind is that there are issues in terms of context-specific issues. One that we ran into is, as we were recruiting kindergarten students, the kindergarten rosters weren't solid until a few weeks into schools, and this varied based on the school district. But in general, we realized that our timeline wasn't always going to be the timeline that the district takes, so we adjusted our expectation there. And then we also engaged in multiple methods to obtain consent. Due to the districts that we worked with, some of them were high poverty districts, and obtaining consent was quite a challenge, parents returning forms and things like this. So we were able to have approved through IRB a phone consent procedure as well. And we also worked with teachers to recruit, to distribute information. And then we also went to sites to recruit depending on the study. We found that the assessment procedures, need to a very clean kind of protocol, and needs to, work well in school-based settings. And this leads to, making sure that staffing is, your staffing is in place. In terms of implementation, participant buy-in is an issue. You might have buy-in at the district level, but not at the school level, or at the school level, but not at the teacher level, depending on what you're studying. So that buy-in from all constituents is very important. In addition, you as the researcher cannot be seen as the evaluator or the person who's going to tell the school district what you're doing. So really clear information about that the school district, you're not there to kind of tell on them and talk to the school district, doesn't receive information about the classrooms and things. Something that's also been raised more frequently in education research is better documentation of the counterfactual. I can't say that I'm great at this yet, but I do strive toward better documenting what's going on in the control group. I found that longitudinal interventions are very challenging. In my circumstances, we had district turnover, we had politics that were actually about the curriculum that I was implementing. I had to speak to large school board meeting, and I asked, how many PIs do this? You have so much research going on in this district. How many PIs actually talk to the school board? And they were like, nobody, just you, because of the nature of what I was studying. Textbook adoption cycles also create a problem for longitudinal interventions where districts want to, do something else. And then I've learned that multiple plans are always needed. Everything doesn't go to plan, and there's always disruption. There's always some sort of disruption in plan And even you can't even predict sometimes, like COVID, what might happen. And unfortunately, COVID stopped our longitudinal study from data collection in the second year. Again, and we could talk about these more in the Q&A, there's considerations for conducting RCTs remotely. I think the collaboration with other scholars is absolutely key. I have methodologists that I rely on heavily, and collaborators that I trust and rely on. There's a firewall between the implementation team and the methodologist who's conducting the random assignment or doing the analyses. I think those firewalls are important considerations, particularly if you've helped develop the intervention. And in terms of leading your team, I think staffing and organizational, really understanding how to lead your team, because it's kind of like you're leading a small business, but you've never been trained to do so in your academic career. So I think seeking out ways of understanding how to lead larger teams and play multiple roles. I find that I'm the person who's talking with the district. I'm the person who's talking with the data people. I'm the person who's writing up the results. I'm the person who's, right, I know all of the different roles because at one point or another, I played every role in a randomized control trial in my past. And then in terms of systems, keeping the end in mind in the beginning. Here are some resources: the What Works Clearinghouse Standards Handbook and Group Design Standards training modules, the consortstatement.org, and the Within and Between podcast by Dr. Sarah Hart from the Department of Psychology is an excellent podcast that kind of opens a window into issues like data management, where a lot of good resources are.